something like that one year. It was a gateway. It was,
May I ask how old you are, so I'm kind of.
at that point,
No.
oh, now?
Yeah.
I just turned 29.
Okay, so when you were 12 years old, what year was that? 94 or something?
96.
Yeah, 96.
96. Okay, I'm just trying to piece together the timeline.
So, long time ago. But anyway, you know, the internet, like, especially in Mississippi, now I'm just telling this from a Mississippi perspective, you know, the internet was just kind of getting here. Everybody had AOL. It was slow as Christmas. I couldn't get on until my parents were done on using the phone and everything. Man, that was a drag. But we got a computer, and I mean, I was just fascinated with it. Before then, I had played on computers, like at my brother's house. They had a computer, and I mean, I was just so fascinated with it. I would go. You remember the old encyclopedia CD-ROMs? You know, some of them had like videos and stuff on it. I would go and just like, you know, pull that up just to like watch videos and just to read and stuff like that. Like, and then finally, one of my friends was like, "Hey, you know," he's like, "You should try to, you know, start coding or whatever." And so anyway, so I just kind of dove in and started like reading up tutorials and stuff like that, going to buy books and stuff, and just kind of doing some basic stuff. And around that time, my family was like really big into sports, so we would, half of my family is Ole Miss fans, the other half are Mississippi State fans. So like I kind of experienced like the Egg Bowl in our, you know, living room, you know, pretty much every year. But we would go to all the games, and I mean, it just kind of naturally, just kind of, you know, a young kid or whatever, you get interested in stuff like that. You put them in around that environment or whatever, they naturally start to kind of pick it up and stuff. So I really had a huge interest in sports, and I became a Buffalo Bills fan, you know. And the reason I became a Bills fan, I get this question a million times a day, is there were a lot of Ole Miss and Mississippi State players that went to play for the Bills or whatever. So there's kind of like this eerie connection with this team from New York, in the middle of nowhere in New York. But I became a Bills fan, and I got lucky one year. I think it was in '97. My dad bought tickets to go to my first Bills game in New Orleans, and so I was ecstatic. You know, I was like so geeked up and everything. I at that point had already bought like 2 or 3 Bills jerseys online. I bought some Flutie Flakes online from Duck Flutie. But anyhow, we decided to go down there or whatever, and this was my first NFL game. I'm like 11 or 12 at the time, and I had like the experience of a lifetime because I just was so captivated about the excitement and the experience of this game. And, you know, everybody was around. I'm sure you've all kind of been to a game and like, man, this is kind of a spectacle. But I was just so captivated by it, and I was drawn to it and stuff. Well, we're at the game, and this is kind of the moment where I knew I wanted to do something in sports media or whatever. We're at the game, and you know, the Bills win. They beat the Saints pretty bad. It's the last time the Bills made the playoffs, by the way. And anyway, the game's over. We're kind of walking around the Superdome. And there's this escalator that goes down. That's all we see. There's no signs on it. It's kind of this mysterious looking escalator. And so my dad and I were like, okay, well, you know, let's just go down and see where it goes, you know, why not? And so we go down the escalator, and when we get down to the bottom, we realize we're in the players' family room. And it's right outside the locker room where all the players come to meet their family and stuff. Somehow we got in, and nobody's there, like no security, nothing like that. Nobody stopped us or anything. You know, we just looked, you know, we blended in and stuff. And I got to meet, basically, it was like a 12-year-old dream. I got to meet the owner of the Bills, Ralph Wilson. I got to meet, at that time, Wade Phillips was the coach. I got to meet Doug Flutie. I got to meet Andre Reed, you know, the Bills' leading receiver. Got to meet Thurman Thomas. Got to meet Bruce Smith. Got to meet all these guys, and boy, like at that time, I mean, I was just like, that was it for me. And I remember like driving home, you know, just about 3 hours drive back here to Jackson from New Orleans, and I remember telling my dad in the car, I was like, I'm going to do something in sports and technology. I remember that moment, like I remember it like clear as day. Like I was sitting in the passenger seat, I was looking out the window, I turned to him and I said, I'm going to do something in sports, media, technology, or whatever. So that's kind of how I got started in it. And I got back and I started looking at this computer, and I was like, you know what? You know, maybe I can do something here. At that time, the Bills had a website. It was just a site. You know, it was like back in the day when everybody just put a business card online, basically. And I was like, you know what? I'll put a website up and I'll put news on it because nobody. This is back before all these websites were putting out content and stuff. And so, so I built this website, and like I said earlier, it was on the NetDoor ISP member page. So it was the address was like netdoor.com/ J Miley 1983, all this different stuff. And so I started from there. And so over the course of about 6 to 7 years, we grew that into a full-fledged business. And it started off, I had this website, I would post tips and just different news and stuff like that. At that point, internet radio was like just coming online. And if you remember the internet radio days, every station ran to put their feed online initially, and then they extracted it all, put it all behind a paywall. And now they have it back out, for free. From most of them do. But I would listen to the WGR 55, which is a Buffalo AM sports talk station, and I got the nerve one day to call up there and talk to one of the hosts, and her name was Ann Burke. She was like the first female sports talk host in the country. And anyway, she didn't bring me on the air, thank goodness, because I probably would have just like froze. But she would occasionally, over the couple of months or whatever, plug our website. And so that's how I started getting hits and stuff. And then she even went a step further. She emailed me some writers up there in Buffalo. And what they would do, how I would get content that no one else was doing, the writers, they have a notebook. And when they go to the press conference like that, they fill this notebook out. Some of the notes they don't use. Peter King's becoming famous for his Monday morning quarterbacks. All his notes that he doesn't publish and stuff. He just does it on Monday mornings. And so the writers from up there and different radio hosts would send me the stuff that they didn't use or whatever. And I would just, as soon as I got it, I would just like throw it on the website or whatever. And so that's kind of how I started getting content and just kind of fostered from that. Like I said, Kent Hull was my first interview, and it just kind of grew from that. We got, over the course of like 6 years, we got David Stava, who was a New York Times sports writer. He actually wrote a weekly column for us. We had Larry Bump, who is an Associated Press writer at the time, and he actually wrote a book about the Bills. Both of those were like big names among Bills fans, and so they both would write weekly columns for us. And at the peak, we were getting 20,000 hits a day, and even at that point, we still weren't the #1 Bills site. There was another Bills site that was getting, another Bills fan site, not an official relation with the Bills or whatever, but another Bills website that was getting 80,000 hits a day. And so that's where I kind of knew, like, I built it because I was a Displays fan, and I knew that there was more, there was a need, there was something out there for more team-specific content. But that's where I knew that there was a market right then for individual teams, because the Bills are not the most popular. A lot of fans in here, or any NFL fans in here, will tell you, for those that are not, the Bills are not the most popular team in the NFL by any stretch of the imagination. And so that's when I saw it. I said, okay, well, there's a market for this, each fan has its own market or whatever. And another mentor for me at that point was a guy named Gene Swindle, who runs genespage.com. Some of you may have heard of it. It's a real popular MSU fan site. And Gene actually was getting at that point like around 70,000 hits a day. For Mississippi State, we're talking about like one of the the second to smallest SEC team fan base or whatever. And so that's when I kind of, like I said, that's when I kind of knew that there was a market for individual teams and stuff out there. So I did that website. I ended up selling that website, and when I sold it, I had an opportunity to go work with Sirius Satellite Radio. Some of the connections I had made through the website with Yahoo and Vsporto and all these others. At that time, the Bills website, we became, before Fox Sports started putting out their own content, and Yahoo did, we were the sole news provider for Buffalo Bills news for them. And so I eventually just sold it off to them.
What year was that, if I may ask?
That was 2004. So sold it off to them, and like I said, through the connections I had with Sirius, radio has always kind of been something I'm more interested in, The time we got the computer, the very next year, I talked my parents into buying a 13-year-old a CB radio. And I would sit in my room and just like listen to it all night. Like I was just so fascinated by this stupid radio that nobody else was interested in or whatever. I just thought it was like the coolest thing, and so you know, I was just really interested in it. So going to Sirius was really kind of a dream come true. And all I did with Sirius, my job, I was kind of an independent contractor. So my job was to go out and find existing internet radio shows and podcasts and bring them onto Sirius. And part of that we would have to do is, number one, identify one that has a huge audience online, podcast, whatever. And then we would have to find sponsors to help pay for their airtime and stuff like that. Because at the time, Sirius had like 200 channels, or 250 channels, and they were trying to fill up content for it. So my two proudest accomplishments, the only two shows I signed to Sirius, I took on an associate producer role with both of those, so we would travel around the country when they would do like, you know, trade shows and all sorts of stuff. But my two proudest accomplishments there, I signed, and this shows you how, this kind of taught me how niche content is really big too. I signed a bodybuilding talk radio show, and I signed a scuba diving talk radio show. And they were actually popular. Both of them averaged, well, the bodybuilding one averaged about 100,000 listeners per show, and the scuba diving talk show one averaged about 60,000 per show. So that to me showed me that, you know, once again, reiterated that point, there's a market for, you know, really, you know, I guess you would say niche, you know, in industries or whatever. So, I mean, that was really cool, and like I said, the other big thing with that is I would just go around sharing the idea of Vsporto to everybody. Of course, I didn't have a name for Vsporto at that point, it's just this idea. And I actually, just to prove, because some people don't believe I had the idea when I was 12, the Clarion Ledger did a story on the Bill site back then, and there's a quote at the very end of the article. They say, like, what do you want to do 10, 15 years from now? There's a quote at the end of the article, and I give them the idea. I said, I want to start a radio network for every sports team out there. I said it in that quote, that exact quote.
I think I read that.
Anyway, so I had the idea back then, and it just kind of sat with me the entire time, like over the years and stuff. And so when I was at Sirius, naturally, you know, I'm going to pick the brains of some of the most experienced, most smartest people in radio. And I did, and I mean, one of my biggest mentors there was a guy named Kevin Straley. He was the Senior Vice President of News, Talk, and Sports Programming there. And he was really positive with, you know, he would always kind of, I would just go to his office and just be like, you know, I would just follow him like a shadow, you know. And I would go to his office, ask him, tell me stories, and, you know, share experiences, stuff like that. He came from Boston, what is it, WEEI or whatever, out there. It's a big sports talk station nationally. Anyway, I mean, I would just, you know, soak it up like a sponge. Like any story, any experience I could hear, I was definitely all about. And he was really positive. Everybody at Sirius was positive. But like I said, I got to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm kind of unfulfilled here or whatever. So I left, and this was right around the time that Pandora came out on the iPhone. When the iPhone first launched, they didn't have third-party apps. So like your app wasn't on, you know, no one had access. They only had like standard apps that shipped with the phone. And so the very next year, when they came out the next iPhone, they opened up the App Store and allowed third-party developers to submit apps and stuff. And like I said, Pandora was just a website, if you remember. It started out in 2000, and from 2000 to 2008, they had only gained 5 million users. And when they launched in 2008, they grew to 50 million users. And now they have over, I think it's like 350 million users. And the biggest thing with that is, the biggest key point with that and why it was so popular, why they exploded, is because before that point, you could not take internet radio in the car with you. And at that point, the iPhone and Apple made it, you know, allow you to take internet radio into the car. And as a former radio guy, I know you can attest, or as a radio guy now, the car is where radio listening is done. I mean, that's the land grab right there. And so when that happened, I was researching the cost of what it would take to do this on a terrestrial FM AM side. I was calling, figuring out what I needed to buy from the FCC and transistor towers and stations and equipment and all that, and it was upwards of like $500,000. Well, then I was calling satellite companies, and I was calling like EchoStar and all these different satellite companies to talk about leasing me on bandwidth on satellites. It was $2,000 an hour, so that was completely out of the question right there. And so obviously with the cost of the internet, I mean the costs are way down and stuff like that. It naturally made sense. Plus, you could take it anywhere. You could take it with you, no matter where you went, across the country, across the world, it was always there for you, which is huge. And the biggest feedback I got from Sirius was that this would be a key product for displaced sports fans, and we've seen that with Vsporto. But anyway, that's when I decided to kind of dive in and really do the due diligence and things like that with it. Started working on the business plan, started really researching internet radio, what it would take, started testing out different codes. We had to figure, there's not a recipe manual of how to broadcast a stream to an iPhone at that point, so we were testing out our own stuff and trying to figure out a way to broadcast a stream to an iPhone or just any mobile device. So anyway, we spent a couple months, like 2 or 3 months, figuring that out, and finally when we got it solved, we decided to kind of take the plunge. And so we launched Vsporto exactly 2 years today in 2011. And so we launched our first station, which was Bulldog Sports Radio, and Bulldog Sports Radio covers Mississippi State sports 24 hours a day on radio. And that actually got ranked in the top 30 iPhone sports apps. And so we kind of were impressed with that. Well, 3 to 4 weeks later, we launched another app called Rebel Sports Radio that covers Ole Miss 24 hours a day. And that app actually got ranked to number 40, and we claimed that it didn't beat Bulldog Sports Radio because Houston Nutt was still the coach. But anyway, we saw a really extraordinary success. We actually just launched on Labor Day, we launched 2 new apps. One for Alabama called Bama Sports Radio, one for Auburn called War Eagle Sports Radio. The Mississippi State and Ole Miss apps, just to kind of give you a comparison, they really exploded. Users really ate it up. We were averaging, just between those 2 apps, 250,000 listeners a month. And we're talking about being limited on mobile devices. We feel that's pretty darn good, in a state that, in some parts still lacks high-speed internet. And so we were pretty proud of that. We launched Bama Sports Radio and War Eagle Sports Radio because we wanted an expanded prototype. We consider Rebel and Bulldog kind of almost like our test stations, that kind of, but we launched Bama and War Eagle, and they exploded, obviously, because those fan base sizes are like 6 times what we deal with Ole Miss and Mississippi State. And Bama fans are just, they're nuts. And so when we launched those 2, the Alabama app actually got to the number 11 iPhone sports app ranking. It was ranked above the Yahoo Sports app, it was ranked above the CBS Sports app, and it was ranked, and I keep tabs on this, it was ranked 18 spots ahead of the official ESPN radio app. And so we were obviously pretty proud of that and everything. The Auburn app, actually, there was a point, and it stayed at number 11 for about 6 days. The Auburn app actually got to number 24, and there was about a 4-day period when we had 2 apps in the top 25 of the iPhone sports category or whatever. So we were pretty excited about that. The only other companies that have 2 apps in the top 25, just to kind of give you a comparison, is ESPN and the NFL, the league, the NFL. Those are the only 2 that and I think Yahoo. Those are the only 3 that have 2 apps in the top 25 or whatever. So that kind of gives you a good comparison or whatever. And then one last thing, we didn't know what the growth was going to be and things like that. We saw data on fan base sizes and things like that. We didn't know what to really expect with Alabama and Auburn in terms of downloads and stuff. We had the servers ready, so we could scale up at any moment. We projected, obviously, when you deal with investors and stuff like that, you have to do projections. We had to project growth. Well, I projected 30,000 app installs for Alabama and Auburn for the first month. For Mississippi State and Ole Miss, I got 5,000 the first month. Okay. So for Alabama and Auburn, I projected 30,000 because based on our data, they were 6 times larger in terms of fan base sizes. The first 3 days, we had 34,000. And at the peak download rate for both of those apps, we were seeing 120 apps downloaded every single minute. So basically 2 apps per second. And so we were really excited. But anyway, that's just kind of my story. We've been really excited, and our next goal by next summer or next football season is to launch 50 channels. We feel like we've proven effectively there's a market for the product that we have, especially in terms of users and listeners. And then we've had our Mississippi State and Ole Miss stations are profitable. So, we really are ready to kind of take a big leap in everything. So, with that, I'll answer any questions anybody has.
How do you make money?
Through advertising. So we built
free
our own ad platform. And the cool thing about that is we can program, so we have banners that scroll, but we also do like audio spots, which you may be familiar with like FM AM radio, like an audio spot. So we do that, and we do the banner ads that scroll or display ads that scroll. And the cool thing about it is we can program those banner ads to do anything you can imagine. Interactive stuff like trivia, gaming, social stuff, video ads, you name it, we can do it. So that's how we make money.
How do you turn out the content?
We actually go and find the hosts. All of our content is ours exclusively because there's obviously not enough content out there, for those teams as is or whatever. So we knew we had to, make the content ourselves. So we go and find knowledgeable insiders and experts that already cover those teams that have a unique following, a really good following and stuff like that. And we talk them into coming and, and kind of promoting themselves on our networks.
So your wrap-up plan is getting 50 insiders wherever you're gonna wrap up to next summer?
Well, 50 channels, it'll be more insiders because we average right now about 15 hosts per channel.
Okay.
So whatever, 50 times 15, I can't do the math.
And are they being paid, or is
Yeah, they're being paid. And the big thing we heard in the beginning was, Jim Rome and all those guys, they make 6 figures and all that sort of, in Jim Rome's case, he makes 7 figures, but regardless of, how we're going to pay, those guys are going to ask for enormous, salaries and stuff. Well, they're only talking about one team, so we can, leverage, so we can say, like, really, you're only talking about one team, so the costs are dramatically reduced. Yes, sir.
How often do you rerun the content?
We average right now between 6 to 8 hours of new radio shows per day, per channel. So what we do is kind of like what CNN and ESPN do, in the sense that after their new block of whatever has aired, they'll kind of loop those. We do the same thing. Now we have a live stream that does that, but we also have an on-demand section within the app. So you can open that up, you can scroll through, pick a show you want to listen to, and listen to it. Start to finish on your own time in case you are only in the car for like 4 minutes or whatever. I will say this, we've had some other extraordinary stuff happen. The average FM AM sports talk listening time is around 5 minutes. Our average is about 40 minutes. So it's drastically high, and we feel like that's because we're dealing with avid fans. They want a lot of it, So, yes, sir.
Are you doing any content syndication? So, you deliver your content through your apps, but maybe through other channels, podcasts, other Stitcher or something like that?
We've talked to TuneIn Radio a couple times. Actually, the senior vice president I was telling you about at Sirius, he's now the VP of content at TuneIn Radio. And right now, it doesn't make sense for us on some business revenue levels. They want a split of our revenue just to go on there, and it's a high split, and we just don't feel comfortable giving that up right now. We are in talks with some pretty popular apps, though, and some pretty popular companies to kind of do distribution deals. Another potential way of revenue I see one day is licensing out our content to maybe like FM AM stations.
I was gonna say they ought to be paying you for content, not you giving part of their revenue, your revenue. Yeah, right.
What's your marketing strategy for Alabama and Auburn whenever you open first day, and then what's the tail looking like on your
Well,
downloads?
the marketing strategy, we do a real grassroots campaign. We don't really advertise that much. We've done some test advertising on Facebook and things like that. With that, we learned a lot with the Ole Miss and Mississippi State launches. So we learned a lot. We knew how to apply it with the new apps. So with all the hosts, I mean, some of them are part of these fan sites that get 50, 60,000 hits a day. Some of our hosts have, 10,000, 20,000 Twitter followers. And so we got them to help promote, installing the app and everything. And that really, I think, is the biggest thing. We didn't learn that. We didn't know that going into Ole Miss, Mississippi State. We knew that after that, and so we applied it. So.
What's the tail looking like on the downloads?
Right now, we average, we're doing about 600 app installs a day right now. And on game days, we're seeing upwards of like between 8 and 10,000. So, our previous record of listenership in a month was 250,000. Or I'm sorry, it was 300,000. And this month, we're actually going to hit over 650,000. So, yes, sir.
I understand that for most advertising revenue models, it takes like multiple millions of subscribers to really get to the point where you're making any money. Do you have a sense of how many subscribers you would need to get to your target revenue goals?
I mean, well, we're profitable on those two stations. They're steadily growing. We'll just have to continue to do that. I mean, the biggest, obviously, as we add more stations, that's the key component of that. Because our capture rate right now, we're dealing, our core demographic is avid fans. I mean, who else is going to listen to 24-hour radio on one team, right? So that's our core demographic. Right now, we're capturing between 5 and 8% of the total fan base size. And we expect that at some point to kind of cap off around maybe 20% per fan base. So at that point, it really becomes, that's why we're trying to roll out a network, and that's where the real power in this, takes in effect is being a network.
So do you see any product or service sales that might not be competitive with your existing advertisers, coming into play as another aspect of revenue generation?
Like any other competitors?
Well, no, like your station itself, doing some proprietary or private label products or services.
Like Alabama competing with Mississippi or something?
Say that again?
Like Alabama competing with Mississippi or something?
Well, I don't know what it would be, but something where, in addition to advertising revenue, you're doing some kind of direct sales of a product that or service that the money comes back to you.
Yeah. One thing we want to do is, well, we did roll out a subscription model, and that's going pretty well. And then one thing we're working with as far as advertising is increasing, number one, the click-through rate, which our click-through rate is already pretty high. The average click-through rate on a mobile device is like 0.8%. Our click-through rate right now is like dead on 3%. And so we've already done, like we've got C-Spire. C-Spire is a big partner of ours, a big sponsor of ours. And they've already seen up to, I think we did a number crunching the other day. It's like 60 times their ROI on their first month they spent money with us. So, and the key in that is we're dealing with rabid fans. So we feel like what we see is any message we put in front of them, they're just like, really supporting it and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, that's the goal, is to build out more revenue streams and everything. So yeah. Yes, sir.
Where are your servers and how are you selling your ads?
Well, myself, and then we have a sales manager that helps sales for us. And then as far as servers, we don't have anything like on the ground. It's all cloud servers. We use the same servers like Instagram and everybody else uses, like Netflix.
Do you have pay-per-click or pay-per-view, or how do you sell, what basis?
As far as selling,
Yeah.
we do a lot like what terrestrial radio does, which is they do packages, and so we kind of package a lot of things together. We kind of have to do that because we're combining like display ads, audio ads, and then mentions on the air. So we kind of tailor all that into like a package or whatever. We can do but we base that pricing on a CPM rate.
How many people are on your development team?
Just myself and Jim, our other co-founder, so it's really like 1.5 guys.
Really?
Yeah.
That's it, huh?
Yeah.
And then are you looking to expand? Are you looking to expand with more people or
More developers?
more developers? I
Yeah.
would say, yeah, because you're looking
We'd have to with 50 channels.
I would
And the
say
other
so.
thing is too, so right now we have 4 individual apps.
Right.
What we'll probably do going forward, especially when we launch 50, is probably combine that under one app. And the idea there is, number one, I think a developer is going to look at us like we're insane if we say, hey, we need to put out 50 apps, you know, even if you're just copying and pasting the code or whatever. I mean, it still takes a while, you know. So, yeah, I mean, I think from a scalability standpoint, that's what we're going to do. But the other big thing in that is, so our big goal is like we want to create a better sports radio experience. And so if we have 50 out there, I was talking about the power of the, you know, it being a network and everything. You know, like I have some friends, like I have a friend, he's a Alabama fan and he's a diehard Mississippi State fan. And so at that point with 50 stations, our goal is to, you know, allow you to go create like your own personalized station. Where say like if you're an Alabama and a Mississippi State fan,
So like a hybrid.
and you can filter your content from both of those. So it's your own personal sports station and you get the content of your favorite teams. You know, for me, like I'm a Cubs fan and a Bills fan, 4 minutes soul. And you know, like I can build my own station to have that content, you know, come in or whatever.
You could call
That's why we want to grow it to a network.
Call it Fandora.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
What are you doing in terms of social media for drawing people into the app? So, for instance, if you have people in the Mississippi State app and somebody's talking smack on the Ole Miss channel, and you know, like you put a message out there or whatever to try to draw those fans in or whatever, are you doing anything like that?
Yeah, we engage fans. We use social it's been really well for us. I think right now we have, with all our channels, we have like 10,000 Twitter followers, roughly. Bulldog and Rebel Sports Radio have close to 5,000 each. One of the things we do is we just get on there and interact with them. You know, we crack jokes with them. We are real personable with them and stuff like that. We really just try to connect with them, and that's been really good for us. So, I mean, it's worked really well. The whole thing's kind of taken on a viral, you know, it's kind of going viral in some senses. So, the Auburn station already has a Twitter page that's about to surpass 1,000 followers. So.
That's awesome. Reminds me of Facebook, when they first started, it was strictly colleges. You had to have a college ID and that kind of.
Well, what we want to do, obviously, is, you know, I'm really more of an NFL guy, so obviously that's kind of where I want to take it. But obviously with that, it's more, you know, locked down and
With the
stuff.
colleges, you got to eat crop every season.
Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of our goals. My goal is to take it, you know, to 211 team channels. That'd be all college teams, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and hockey teams. And then take it internationally.
Do you have to maintain separate apps for different platforms, or is it
We,
web-based?
yeah, we have Android versions as well, and we don't have them out for the 2 new apps yet for Alabama and Auburn, but they're coming within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So those are the 2 platforms we're on. We're not on any other platforms.
Not Windows?
Not Windows, not BlackBerry. You know, going forward though, I don't know if we'll do Windows, you know, right now. I'm still kind of waiting and seeing like how that kind of shakes out or whatever. But going forward, you know, we want to get on more tablets. That's been a big goal of ours. And then we want to get on more in-home stuff like, you know, Google TV, Apple TV, in the car. Like I've been networking with some the guys that do the app, you know, the app displays and stuff like that for all the different, you know, vehicles makers and car makers and stuff like that.
I'm not too familiar with Apple TV or Google TV. Is it similar to a Roku or something like that?
Yeah, very similar to Roku. Very, very similar. I have Roku. I like it from the channel aspect. You have way more options for content. The only thing is, a lot of it doesn't come through HD. And so that's just kind of been a big issue with me or whatever. Plus, I'm a Bills fan. I get NFL Sunday Ticket on my iPad with the to-go subscription or whatever. And I can AirPlay that or whatever. So, but I use Roku too, don't get me wrong. I
Oh, I
love
like
Roku.
it. Except for the fat Comcast one.
And it's for your money, Roku is probably the best you can get. So.
Do you contract out for the apps or free?
We build them. And myself and, so there's 3 co-founders and we have a guy on our advisor team. 3 co-founders, me, a guy named Kellen Farmer, he's our VP of content. His job is solely, one of the pieces of advice I got at Sirius is to place a heavy emphasis on quality. So I hired a guy to do that. And then the other co-founder of the company is Jim Carter. Jim and I have been friends since I was like 16. He was a Chargers fan, and he had a Chargers website. And he was also one of the first internet radio employees at mp3.com back in the mid-90s. But anyway, Jim, he kind of leads all of our development and stuff like that. I'm really more of a rough back-end guy. He can polish it up and really do a lot more damage than I can. So, and then we have Mike Herman, who was one of the first employees at Google. He's on our advisory team. He was actually brought on to Google in 1999 to kind of help build out their advertising platform. He was a DoubleClick employee. And so anyway, he was there for about 7 years. And so that's kind of our, I guess our entire team. Yes, sir.
So, I don't know, maybe I missed it. What technology are you using for the streaming? Are you
An OGG file. That's what you do for your stream.
okay? And so you can only access it within the app? Like there's, like,
You can do it online. Like we have it online as well. Like
okay,
a
so I
website.
have to go to vsporto.fm
Yeah.
and get it, okay.
What's the trend? Is it going towards radio as opposed to, like, say, a podcast, or are they just both their own entities? Because I'm
That's-
thinking for a lot of people, you got Wi-Fi at home, you can just download 2 or 3 hours, take it with you, and you don't have to worry about it.
It really depends. I mean, I think, we kind of see both of them pretty tied together. So we kind of want to offer that platform. We call it radio, but I mean, it is kind of it's radio / podcast, I mean, you really could say an audio platform or whatever. We call it radio from a branding perspective, and I think going forward, we'll really brand it more as Vsporto, to kind of, like I was talking about, the whole network thing and everything. But we want to provide both because,
You do
live
stream,
radio is
right?
synonymous with sports radio. I mean, that's a big thing, being able to take callers, doing all that sort of stuff. I mean, that's key with sports radio. So we kind of have to have the live stream part of it.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of late to the podcast game, I love them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.